Welcome back to the Boone and Cope Show. I'm Boone.
I'm Cope.
And we're glad to have you here on episode 002.
Numero
How you doing
dos.
over there, Cope?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you, Boone?
I can't complain.
It's a good night so far. I'm ready to make it a little bit better by doing this podcast.
That's right. Absolutely. I'm excited. We have a good lineup this evening. I know we're coming out of the gate from a pretty awesome weekend last weekend. Had Cope down here, came to Georgia, did a little trip, did a little voyage down the Chattahoochee River.
Flew on down south to the sweet, sweet Georgia Peach State.
Sweet, sweet Georgia Peach State. That is what they call it.
So we did a river canoeing trip down the Chattahoochee. One of the interesting things about the Chattahoochee was just a couple days before we decided to take this trip, to take the lonely little canoe out and put all our gear into it, they caught a 500-pound gator.
That's right.
Just upriver. So that just made it a little bit more adventurous.
That was. And then I went to go get our canoe, pulled up into the place, and there's a new picture on the board. You know how a lot of little hunting and fishing stores have their little boards with their
their little
pictures.
bulletin board.
Big catch of the week,
Right.
Got little Johnny shot a 4-point buck, and little Timmy caught himself a little bass. Well, little so-and-so caught himself a big old 10-foot gator. And so when I asked where it was at, it was about 2 miles from our destination, our stovepipe.
And we said, that's awesome. That is great.
That's perfect. Makes it even better, honestly. Made it even better. So we had a good time. Loaded up the canoe, picked Cope up in Atlanta, drove back to the house, and we took off Saturday morning before sunrise.
Yeah, I got a good little 3 hours of sleep or so. That's usually how it goes
right.
when we're hanging out.
That's pretty typical for Boone and Cope.
Go to sleep, open your eyes, it's time to go. Put a pot of coffee on, we loaded up the canoe, loaded up the gear, camera gear too, because we got a couple shots, got a couple videos with it.
We got some great shots. Yeah.
So we headed out at dawn. Well, actually before dawn. So we were on the river well before the sun came up, which is very eerie because there's not a soul out on that river.
Really is. No.
It's a good
Not a sound either.
secluded place. On the banks, it has the steep banks going all the way up, so the trees kind of climb all the way up and put you in kind of this cathedral of the wild.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
So we headed down in the dark. We navigated. Boone had done a scouting trip the Sunday before and found us a really great spot. I mean, probably the best spot on the river.
I don't think it gets any better than where we were at, honestly.
Nice flat land, gravel. It wasn't that muddy where it's all mucky and nasty. You can take your shoes off, you can jump in, you can swim, which we did. Which we learned later after we got out that evening. Some gators were slapping. So we were definitely...
Gator Gary was only about 50 meters from the bank the whole time.
We were definitely in the alligator territory.
That was great. So we started off the morning pretty awesome. We got a pot of coffee going. We had some oatmeal going over a fire. Got a good fire going, blazing. Burned down some coals. Made a little campfire breakfast and coffee before the sun come up. And once the sun come up, we did a Boone and Cope show from the bank, which was great.
Boone and Cope show, Facebook Live, which is amazing. You can be that far out in the wild thanks to technology and cell phone towers that we can actually do something like that in the wild using a Facebook stream. So that's probably our best show. So we should definitely go back and do that again.
We had a great time. We took off from there. We did some fishing. We just slayed the fish. I mean, absolutely put a hurting on fish. And then we ended up coming back. We did some adventuring, built our camp up. We had a couple used Army cots that we were sleeping on, and an old Vietnam-style bug net, old U.S. Army issued bug net from long, long ago. We threw up, keep the bugs out. And that was pretty much camp. That was
Turns
pretty much our
out,
gear,
due to some other circumstances, ran into some jokers that we almost tore the campsite down and headed up the river, but we decided to stay afterwards. So we tore the bug net down, and then we just camped out in the open space. We didn't even need the bug net. It was perfect temperature, nice Georgia night, and not a mosquito even buzzed in my ear all night.
Oh, man, it was perfect.
So just two cots laid out there on the rock right next to the river, gators swimming by, It was it was a perfect night.
Got to go back.
Much
But it
too
was
short.
good times. So we ended up frying up some fish, some bacon, some eggs, some potatoes. Got the cast iron skillet booming. Got it on the fire. Did some old campfire cooking, and we pretty much just had a grand old time there. Got some good shots. We did some fishing. It was a good time. Loaded back up. It was a pretty short trip. We loaded back up and took off Sunday morning around daylight. Once the sun came up, we were pretty much packed up and took off. But it was a great trip.
But the thing is, we were set up that we could probably stay out there for a week if we wanted to.
Right. No doubt.
I definitely look forward to our next trip. Maybe it'll be out west, Montana, Wyoming, something like that, South Dakota.
That'd be awesome.
The bugs would probably be a little bit worse there. But, I definitely want to head west, I think, for our next big trip.
It'd be pretty great. Yeah, that'd be great. So, overall, great time. That was our big adventure. Cope. For those of you tuning in for the first time, or maybe you're not familiar with our situation here, we're a lot of miles away. I can't remember exactly if I think it's a little over 500.
I was going to say 500 plus.
About 500 miles away. He's in Indiana, I'm in Georgia. And so it's pretty tough to make things happen as far as doing adventures like we used to. So anytime we get is good time. So we spent it well, had a great time, and then we're back in the studio now. And we're just cutting some shows, doing some podcasts, and ready to share some exciting insight into the minds of Boone and Cope this week.
So let's talk about our first insight here, Boone.
Let's do it.
I've got a list of topics written down, and the first one I've got is giving 100%. Okay? And what that means is giving 100% in whatever you're doing. Bringing your undivided attention to the task at hand, whether that's work, that's play, that's in relationships, or anything in between. Whatever you're doing, hyper laser focusing on that one thing and letting everything else fall by the wayside.
Okay.
And I think that's a good way to live.
That is. Now, this is definitely just as much mental as it is physical, and vice versa. You can really, really get crazy with the giving 100%. But I think overall it just creates good habits for the brain. You get used to not shortchanging yourself. Life is full of experiences and moments that pass by quicker than you can blink an eye at. And so when you're constantly giving that 100% into life, you're going to get back the value that you put in. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Life is as narrow or as wide as you want to make it, right?
Absolutely.
So I'll use a real world example, right? So I come home from work, and it was a long day. We were up in a hot attic. I do HVAC, and I came home and I thought, the last thing I want to do is anything. I want to sit on the couch and kind of vegetate and play on my phone and watch some Netflix or whatever. But my girlfriend, Jess, she came home and she was all pumped up. She had a good day at work. They did some fun stuff, and she wanted to tell me about her day. But what I wanted to do in my mind, the first reaction is just like, whatever. But what I thought in my mind was, no, I need to take my undivided attention and put it towards her. Mm-hmm. So you turn on the couch, you look her straight in the eyes, and you listen to, her day, and you're engaged, and you're asking questions, and you're interested. And it was just that little switch that you have to turn in your mind. And you have to be like, I'm going to do this, even though it's uncomfortable at the very beginning. I'm going to do this, and then you just kind of get into things. And we've talked about before, if you're working out, the hardest part is the 5 minutes that you've got to amp yourself up to go and do it. Right?
That's the worst part.
I found sometimes, like if you lay out your clothes and your tennis shoes are laid out right next to the door, you're like, well, I'm already 90% of the way there. I might as well slip them on. But then once you go out the door and you're in the open, you need to start jogging. After those first couple steps, you're just like, well, I'm already doing it. What am I going to do? Yeah. Turn around and go back in? I've already come this far.
Yeah.
So I think that's
definitely the hardest part is getting going.
Yeah, that's the same way with most things. It's just deciding that you're going to do it. And then after that, it's actually not that bad once you're into it.
It's funny. You're talking about working out too. David Goggins, which is a huge personal hero of mine, guy I look up to and put on a pretty high pedestal as far as mentally and physically pushing himself and just breaking the barriers of what society puts on our human minds and bodies. But he's got this thing, and it's called the 40% rule. And what it is, and it's pretty spot on. He talks about how when you're working out, or even at work, whatever you're doing, pushing yourself to a limit physically.
Right, faced with a
mentally.
challenge.
Right. When you get to what you think is your 100%, you're, hey, I'm giving it my all. I can't run any faster. I can't run any farther. I can't do one more rep. I'm done. This is it. This is my max, He said when you get to that point, your body is only at 40% of what you're capable of.
Gotcha.
Which is pretty amazing. And I experienced that a lot at work. I experienced that a lot with what we do. And it's a pretty awesome feeling once you get to what you think is that 100% and then not letting yourself stop there. Getting almost obnoxious about it and being like, I'm just going to freaking go harder. I'm just going to push it way harder,
Right.
And you constantly are you're not aiming at a bar that's set at a certain height. You're putting that thing wherever you want to put it, and you're just going after it. And that's a big thing about David Goggins that I like. But he always talks about that 100%. So when you think you're at 100%, keep in mind you're probably only operating about 40% of what you can. And I think that might help give you that little edge to get through the day.
Isn't that crazy? So I know there's that myth where it's like you only use 10% of your brain. And I think that's been disproven. But I wonder if you do use a certain percentage of your brain that's not at full capacity, just like you use a certain percentage of your physical capabilities that aren't at full capacity.
I think that's definitely a thing, without a doubt.
I think about that. I'm like, I wonder if things like meditation or deep thinking or journaling and things like that could bring some higher capabilities out of it. Just like you're talking about, pushing yourself. You're going to run 10 miles and at mile 2, you're like, I'm done. I'm going to start walking. Right. Forget about it. I'll take a break and then go back. I wonder if you can do the same thing with your mind.
Oh, with that, there's no doubt in my mind that you can. I think it operates the same exact way. I think your brain literally tries to conserve itself as much as possible. Right. It tries to control your brain the amount.
It's one of the bigger users of energy, right? It uses most of your calories.
Absolutely. And so that's constantly burning. So you got to think, if that's really constantly going, it's probably saving as much as it can.
Right.
Saving as much energy, which means the output isn't as high as it could be.
That's an interesting argument.
It's that same concept, and that's why we talk about giving 100% as much as you can and as often as you can, because your brain develops this pattern, and your mind, you get into this pattern every single day with, this is how much I give, this is how much I get, and that's it. That's life. And I think that gets us kind of in a rut sometimes, but what we're talking about is I think it actually puts your brain into a pattern to where, all right, I'm operating on 7 out of 10. That gets us through every day. We're good to go here. We're comfortable. We're saving energy. We're saving time. We're good to go. We're just going to operate.
So then you set a new base level of like,
exactly,
that's acceptable. Which when you bring that down, it brings what you think 100% is.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely an argument there.
Very interesting. That might be. We might have to delve into that a little bit more, do some scientific research, and come back with another topic with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I could make up a bunch of stuff about the neurons firing signals from the brain and back.
I don't want to hear about you making up anything. I want to hear some real facts.
There's no point in gibberish at this point. I think it's spot on. I would put my money on this conversation that you could always operate at a higher level with brain.
Yeah. I think that's the whole basis. But yeah, operating on 100% on whatever you're doing, undivided attention in whatever you're doing can bring a lot of value to what you would normally bring. What'd you say, 40%?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of life to be unlocked out there. So I've got
which is crazy.
A good words. We've brought up the good words segment, right?
I love this segment.
All right, so
this is one of my favorite parts.
This is going to be the principal segment that I look forward to in all our podcasts. This is the good words. So I will read mine first. Okay. And this is going to be
hey, so for the people that that haven't been listening to the show, and this is actually only our second show anyway, what we do is we have this thing called the Good Word segment. And until we come up with a better name, that's what the name is. It's the Good Word segment. And basically, we tell each other, or we told each other before we started this podcast series that, hey, let's do a part where we both prepare some words for the podcast. So at some point, we're going to do this segment, and we each have to have a book on hand, paper with words on it, with letters, not a phone, not freaking technology.
Ink on paper, tangible object.
Ink on paper. And we got to bring that and pull a quote from that source that sticks out to us, something that benefits us spiritually, mentally, physically, whatever. And we actually pull some light from. So we don't know what each other's going to say. We don't know what words we brought to the table until we get in the middle of the podcast live, which is awesome. It's part of my favorite part.
We want the genuine reaction
because the conversation is completely organic and natural.
Right.
Which is awesome. So, Cope,
all right,
hit us.
I'll take it away.
Hit us with your good words.
This is called The Trouble Tree. It's a short story. I don't have an author for this. As far as I know, this is an author unknown. I think it's been a story that's spread around for quite a while. Maybe back in the day, it was person to person, and then email chain, and now you see it on social media every now and then. So this is called The Trouble Tree. The carpenter I hired to help me restore an old farmhouse had just finished a rough first day on the job. A flat tire made him lose an hour of work, his electric saw quit, and now his ancient pickup truck refused to start. While I drove him home, he sat in stony silence. On arriving, he invited me to meet his family. As we walked toward the front door, he paused briefly at a small tree, touching the tips of the branches with both hands. After opening the door, he underwent an amazing transformation. His tanned face was wreathed with smiles, and he hugged his two small children and gave his wife a kiss. Afterwards, he walked me to my car. We passed the tree, and my curiosity got the better of me. I asked him what I had seen him do earlier. "Oh, that's my trouble tree," he replied. "I know I can't help having troubles on the job, but one thing's for sure. Troubles don't belong in the house with my wife and the children. So I just hang them up on the tree every night when I come home. Then in the morning, I pick them back up again. Funny thing is," he smiled, "when I come out in the morning to pick them up, there aren't nearly as many as there are as I remember hanging up the night before."
I love that. That's some good stuff right there.
I really like good short stories like that. A good little wrap-up moral at the end.
Man, and that's some heavy stuff, really. It gets about as deep as you want to get into it.
Yeah.
That's bringing troubles home, yeah.
Well, it makes me want to have my own trouble tree or whatever.
Yeah. Well, when you originally you had told me that story before a while back, and I loved that story, and I thought to myself, I'm going to have to get like a 5-gallon bucket or something outside, like a Lowe's bucket, and call it my trouble bucket. Yeah.
The trouble bucket.
Trouble bucket. And but no, I'm definitely going to have to get something now because that's inspiring.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a tree in your front yard, I guess you have a trouble mailbox, but
yeah.
Sometimes you open up the mailbox and there's troubles in there.
But then it gets all over your mail, and then you carry your mail inside. Next thing you know, you got trouble all over your mail.
Never mind. Bad idea.
Yeah, bad idea. Return to sender.
But yeah, I think that's definitely right. That goes along with what the short little anecdote I was telling you about when we were talking about giving 100% is with leaving things where they are, right? There's certain situations where certain emotions belong in some place, and then sometimes you need to drop them off, leave them, and come back to them later.
For sure. I love that. The trouble tree, that's good stuff.
All right, let's hear your good words.
My good words comes from a book called Endurance. Endurance is an amazing, amazing novel, and it's about this guy named Ernest Shackleton. All right, and Ernest Shackleton, which you probably know who he is, he took a little trip in 1914, and it was a huge voyage, basically the first big voyage in a boat, 850 miles across the sea. All right. And basically it went horribly, terribly wrong. Because if you can imagine a boat in the early 1900s, going up against 850 miles of the Arctic, just probably not.
And his destination was
the Arctic Circle.
The Arctic Circle.
I'm sorry, Antarctica.
Okay. The other end.
So,
okay, gotcha.
Yes, my bad. I get my Arctics confused.
They're all cold either way.
So, yeah. So, Ernest Shackleton takes this ship called the Endurance, of course. And this guy that wrote this book, his name is Alfred Lansing, all right? And he took all of Shackleton's journals and the journals and diaries of his crew members, the ones that survived, because it was a deadly, insane trip that spanned over the course of a very long time. And he took all of the journals and all of the firsthand accounts and made this book about the actual voyage. So it's pretty amazing. All right. So I pulled a tiny quote here from one of the chapters. And this guy is talking about Shackleton and the character that he was as a captain, as a ship captain, as a man in general. What it says is, whatever his mood, whether it was happy and breezy or dark with rage, he had one pervading characteristic. He was purposeful. And I love that.
Purposeful.
And that goes, which is funny that it goes straight into our giving 100%, and you're going to get what you give. So no matter what this guy's mood was, he was purposeful, man. There's always something. He was always driving towards something. And I think that's so easy to lose sight of in the world today because there's so much crap constantly going on.
Right.
Politically, in the world around you, at work, wherever you're at, there's always just junk and garbage going on.
Something to occupy your mind.
Yeah.
To stray you away from a goal or a purpose.
Yeah, for sure. And so if you can move through life with this sense of purpose in mind, then you can constantly give that 100% that you need to get every ounce out of life that you can.
Right. It's like trying to quiet your mind from the outside influences.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of put myself in there and I was like, all right, if somebody was writing a book about me and I was that line, I was that line that this guy wrote. It's like, is that what they would say?
Right.
No matter whether Boone was happy as could be and just breezy or he was filled with rage, he always had this sense of purpose. And it's a good thing to kind of reflect onto yourself and say, hey, is that me? Is that the way I am? Is that the way I act? Is that the way I portray myself? So, food for thought.
I don't know. Sometimes you wonder, what would a future biographical novel about your life be in this moment, right? Especially us thinking that maybe one day, we're young, we've got a lot of time. Maybe one day we can do something that impacts the world in a positive way, right? Something to be remembered for outside of just your close family and friends circle. And you think, I wonder what this chapter would be like right now.
Oh, man.
Right? Well, what would they look back and say? And, we've talked about this before. You've got the Paris letters from Hemingway, and you've been reading those over.
Yeah.
When he was
I love those.
He was a young man, stayed over there in Paris for a number of years. But that was his formidable years that he was growing into the artist that he would become today, or become, in the future. And you wonder, would they look back on texts one day? Us texting back and forth, is that the communications that historians will look back at 300 years from now?
Right.
But how audacious is it to say that, maybe there's a chance that historians will care about me at all?
Yeah. I don't know, man. You never know. I think that's what part of this podcast is about.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thought. Yeah, it absolutely is part of this podcast, is documenting our thoughts.
Right.
One-on-one, having a conversation that we usually have that goes unrecorded. We figured we'll record it and put it out into the world. Maybe somebody will get some value out of it in the long run.
For sure. I like that. So that was some good words. That's our good word segment.
The good word segment. I think that'll definitely be a staple on this.
Our longer podcast will probably bring in two. Close with one and maybe open with one or something.
Yeah.
But I really like it. I really like the good word segment, because I spent about 30 or 45 minutes going over probably 4 or 5 different books this evening, where it was like, all right, got to get my good words ready. I've got 4 or 5 different quotes in mind from books that I've read in the last several months. And I was kind of like, all right, what am I going to do? And so I read through some of Hemingway's letters, 1929 to 1931. I read a book called Boone by Robert Morgan, which is the true accounts of Boone and who he was. There was just some great, great stuff. It was good to look back on some books that I read and try to find some good words. So
the funny thing is, a lot of times with books, is you read them, page by page, and it's a long process. Like, you really have to delve into books. You really have to put your mind at ease and sit down, whether it's in the evening or you have like a lazy Sunday or something. You have to put all your energy into reading something, because if your mind wanders, I think everybody's had this phenomenon where you read an entire page or maybe 2 pages and think, man,
and you don't even know what you read.
I didn't even listen to myself.
I do that all the time.
I didn't hear myself thinking those words to put them in my head because I was thinking about something else. You have to have that 100% undivided attention when you are reading.
Yeah. That's a struggle for me, man.
Yeah.
It really, really is. I have to be in a very unique mood, a very peculiar mood to be able to read a book. Mm-hmm. And I hate that. I hate that about myself, honestly.
But see, I think everybody has a different way of learning, right? I think
for sure.
Some people are visual. Some people have to be hands-on. Some people can just read a textbook and get it, right? Yeah. Some people just have to do to learn.
Right.
But
no doubt.
Yeah, I guess that comes down to self-awareness. How is the best way that you learn? But also, I think books are held on a pedestal too, where they say, oh, yeah,
they are.
I read a book, therefore I am more educated in that matter. But really, right. I mean, if you know the subject, whether you read the book or somebody else did and told you, and now you have the knowledge, either way, you still have the knowledge.
Yeah, which is awesome. I love it. All right. I'm going to shut her down here. Close up the Boone & Co. podcast, episode 002, in the books. It was a great one. Cope, it was a pleasure as always.
Can't wait.
Thank you for your good words.
I will see you on podcast number 3, Boone.
All right. We hope you guys enjoyed this. We had to run a little bit short tonight, but we'll see you next time.
This is the Boone & Cope Show. And remember, if it makes a better story,
do it. Do it. Y'all have a good night.
Good night.
And tune your ears to the Boone & Cope Show.